We learned from the Sicha of the Rebbe, and we're continuing on, a very interesting question. How could it be that Adam sinned by eating the fruit from the tree? How could he do such a weird thing? Why, first of all, he was commanded directly from God not to do it. Second of all, it seems it was basically the only real direct commandment he got from God. Third, he got the commandment 3 hours before Shabbat. And if he would have held himself back for 3 hours, he would have been able to eat from the tree. And it seems that he knew this. And even more, Adam knew that he was created by God. He was not an independent, right? A person could say, listen, my mother and father created me, and God is, for the rabbi, it's in the synagogue, leave me alone, right? Here, Adam knew that God created him. Just a few hours later, he didn't exist, and all of a sudden he existed, that's it, and God was talking to him. God told him, started talking to him, and God, what it means that God was talking to him, we don't know, but it must have been something like, the Jews at Mount Sinai. A shaking experience. And the Jews at Mount Sinai, we can say they sinned. It says over there they sinned with the golden calf because they were so dependent on Moses. But Adam wasn't dependent on anybody. He was alone. He was alone. He knew that God created a direct experience of God. You didn't have to prove to him that God existed. Right? All of a sudden there was one thing he was not supposed to do. Don't eat from the tree, and he ate. How could it be? So the Rebbe says the explanation for this is very simple, but it's very shocking. God created the world, but he also created what's called a selfish impulse, Yetzer Hara. And Yetzer Hara is one of God's best followers, most faithful followers. Does his job 24/7. Nothing will stop him. And what's his job? To trick people, to confuse people, to give people a challenge, to try to entice them to do sins, to go against God's will, to forfeit their purpose in the world, to rebel against the Creator, to worship egotism, their own self, their own feelings, instead of their own objectivity, God. So here's Adam. He had every reason in the world to serve God, and he had no reason in the world to sin, but he felt it. He felt it. And the Yetzer Hara convinced him, listen to your feelings. Go according to your feelings. Adam was created a human being. What's a human being? Free choice. God wanted Adam to have free choice. In order to have free choice, it has to be that you have an urge to do the wrong thing. So it says, every person, so the more important that a thing is that you should do to serve God, the more the Yetzer Hara has a godly obligation to try to convince you not to do it. Every person feels this, at least temporarily, by himself. There are things in doing the Torah of mitzvahs which a person wants to do, logically. These things are very easy. It should be that these things are very easy to do them than other things which are verbunden mit große Anstrengungen, which are connected to tremendous difficulties. A person can feel by himself that sometimes these things which are very easy are very difficult for him. Sit down and learn Torah. Of course I'll sit down and learn Torah. But first, let me have a cup of coffee, right? But your chavrusa is here, he's waiting to learn with you. Oh, yeah, sure, of course, let's go, let's learn. Oh, but first, I'll go to the bathroom. Oh, and I forgot I have to do something. And all of a sudden, the things that seem to be the most simple are difficult. The reason is because, like we said before, as those things which a person is more, it's more important that he does it, the Yetzer Hora works hardest in order to convince him and trick him not to do it. Sometimes it can even be, it can feel a mol zayin, it can be that those things which are more difficult for him to do come from the rabbis, or they're just a custom. And the other things which are easier for him to do, leichter, these are mamash from the Torah. To put on tefillin, to learn Torah, absolutely no problem whatsoever. But to put water by my bed, to grow a beard, he just can't do it. Right? He's just afraid. Aber, but benogea zayin neshama, by his soul, zayin adavka, those mitzvahs of the rabbis, those happen to be the most important things to him. Sometimes even a custom. Remember, we learned there was a Sicha by the Rebbe that why in Chabad, it says in the order of the questions that we ask, by the 4 questions that are asked, as it starts off with just a custom. Right? A lot of people start off, why on this night don't we eat regular bread? We eat only matzah. Right? Why do we? and then after that it says, why do we eat bitter herbs? And then after that it says the bitter herbs. And the last thing they ask is the custom, leaning over with it. Why is it that we have to? In Chabad, they ask about the custom first. Why? It says because sometimes the customs are the most difficult things. They're the most immediate things, right? And they're sometimes the hardest. Like it's expressed a lot of times in Chassidim. In Chassidut, avuch b'mai haya zahir tafei. What? It says, it brings it in the Igeres HaKodesh. What was your father's favorite commandment? What was he most careful about? As yeder neshama, that every soul has a certain commandment which is more connected to his essence and his purpose in the world, and the soul coming into the body. And that commandment, a person has to really put extra effort into, more than the other commandments, which are similar to all the Jews. Every Jew puts on tefillin, every Jew. When there, for instance, in Chabad, there's this custom to give charity when you daven, before you daven. It's a very easy thing for a person not to do. Very easy thing. And some people, right? But it's also a very easy thing, yes, to do. Some people say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, next day. When the Rebbe, therefore, some people, it's very, very essential that they do these seemingly unessential things. It's a parsha that we have, Akiv, Parshas Akiv. There's the mitzvahs that you just trample under your feet. Yeah, not so important. Therefore, the Yetzer Hora on these things which are especially important to you, even though they might seem to be secondary, it's only maybe a custom or something, the Yetzer Hora makes special difficulties on these commandments. Why? Because they are, by him, very, very important. Same thing. Well, how do we know this other than because the thing of Adam with the tree? It was so very easy for him just to wait for 3 hours and not eat from the tree. So no, because it was so important, is all of a sudden came all of these weird difficulties and things that it's okay, I'll put it off later. Okay, I'll eat the tree. No big deal. There's a well-known story about the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, that when he was in France, and came the holiday of Sukkot, and there were lulavs, there were esrogs you could, but there's a special thing to have a very nice esrog. If you look in the laws, the laws of etrog, there's a lot of ways that you can sort of get by on an etrog. There's a lot of leniencies that you can make on an etrog. So you can have like a, what do they call it? Grade A, grade B, grade C. And it seems that in France, there were a lot of kosher etrogs, but none of them were really like grade A etrogs. And they say that the Rebbe, in those days, in order to get a nice etrog, you have to go more to the south, or maybe anyway, to go to Italy. In Chabad, they have a custom to take an etrog from Italy. Also, it's a custom of ours. A custom you don't have to do.
Calabria.
A Calabria estrog, the Yanova, it's called an estrog. So you don't have so by Chabad, that's called beauty. To have a beautiful etrog means it has to be beautiful, but also has to come from Calabria. To go from France to Calabria was a very difficult thing. In fact, it was dangerous, and he was a religious Jew with a beard. In any case, the Rebbe went, and he came back. Nobody knew where he went, and he came back a certain amount of time later, and he had an etrog from Calabria. And it meant that, why did he have to do a thing like that? Because he realized that this was a very important thing for him to do. Also, the Rebbe was a very important person, so everything he did was important. But, a person, he could have said, listen, I do a lot of important things, and this, I'm risking my life. If something happens to me, then I'm a very important person. The world needs me. He could have made all these excuses, and they would have been very valid excuses. But in the end, he wouldn't have had this Calabria etrog, which was just like a hidur mitzvah and an extra thing. But still, he realized that man is not in this world for himself. We're in this world to serve God in the most detailed and seemingly unimportant ways. And that's sometimes where the Yetzer Hora really does its work. And that's what the message over here is coming to tell us. Why Adam, how it could be that Adam ate from the tree. His Yetzer Hora worked so hard on him. It was so important. He says, yes, it was important. Because it was important, he should have realized its importance. But on the other hand, the Yetzer Hora really realized the importance. The Yetzer Hora was a much better Chassid than Adam was. I didn't say Abraham. Than Adam was. Adam thought, I'll luzz up a little bit. The Yetzer Hora, no way. It worked with all of its power. This is also one of the teachings from the Maimar Rizal. Kol gadol michavero yitzro gadol imenu. Anyone who's greater, any Jew who is greater, who has more potential, his mind is greater, his intellect is greater, his memory is greater, he knows more Torah, says, if so, it means that his Yetzer Hora is also bigger. Because what's greater the mensch is, the greater that a person is, all more is relevant to him to do the commandments. And therefore, for Leik Zichoiv them, Mer, their Yetzer Hora, therefore the Yetzer Hora really works on him. There used to be sometimes these great genius Jews that were maskilim and right, that went against the Torah totally. The Zionism was filled with them. Asher Ginsburg, Echad Ha'am, and these people, they were geniuses in Torah. But what? They let one little thing go by and another little thing go by, and who says you have to wear a kippah, and who says you have to have tzitzis, and who says you have to be exact on Shabbos, and who says you have to be exact on what you eat, until finally they just permitted everything. Because a great person has a bigger Yetzer Hora. Figure a great person, he knows better. He knows better. Well, I'm going to do a stupid thing like that. All of a sudden he finds that he can't hold himself back. And exactly the opposite. Because he's a great person, he can make up great excuses. und darüber, and therefore verlegt sich auf dem mehr the Yetzer Hora. Therefore, the Yetzer Hora puts more emphasis on this person. Also, another reason is in order that a person, why does the Yetzer Hora work on such a great person? So that he'll have free will. A person that's very great, right? He can explain to a crowd 50 reasons to keep the Shabbat. 50 reasons, 150 reasons. He's such a genius in every situation. He can answer every question, any sort of temptation you might have, he can knock it down. And he himself, all of a sudden, does a sin. How can it possibly be? Why? Because the Yetzer Hora works hard on a person. And when it works hard on a person, it drives him crazy, drives him berserk. Moves in the kochos, the hepech kedusha, zayin and them, zelber, mas. So therefore, because you know that the Yetzer Hora is working hard on you, so you have to work hard for God. At least as hard as the Yetzer Hora is working for God. He's putting temptations in your path. That's his job to do. So you have to ignore him. Oh, one second. Somebody came in, went out. All right. This is the powers of Kedusha. You have to put more holiness into it. And therefore, it says anyone who's greater than his friend. What do you mean he's greater? Because he is greater means he's more important. The things he does are more important. Therefore, the Yetzer Hora drives him crazy. He has more powers from holiness. Therefore, his Yetzer Hora is greater. A lot of times you see, it's really quite paradoxical, but success. When a person sometimes is very successful, a rabbi, a speaker, a leader, right? He's tremendously successful. He has powers, abilities, senses. He can tell the future. He can read people's personalities. He can give advice like nobody else, right? And because of that, he can't stand it if anyone is more successful than him. That was the story of Yeravam ben Nevat in the first temple, right? Just a few years after the first temple was there, he divided the whole kingdom. All right, he was given permission to divide the whole kingdom, but he made everyone do idols, idolatry. 10 tribes from the 12 tribes. He made them do idolatry for 200 and who knows how many years until the upper part of Israel was conquered. Why? Because the greater that he was and the more successful he was, success makes a person crazy. That was the whole test of the Akedah. All Abraham wanted from life was one thing, a son that would carry on his way. That's all he wanted. And he succeeded. He had a son. And God said, okay, give him up. And Abraham said, no problem. I'm giving him up. The most important thing in the world really was important, Yitzchak. And Abraham says, no problem. Whatever you want, God. No, he didn't think about himself at all. This is above human. That's a Jew. The greater a person is, the greater the temptations are that he has. And the greater his urge is to go against God, and the more successful he'll be if he does go against God, because he's a great person. This is the learning, what we can hear from the first man. Why? That he could not hold himself back from the sin of the tree of knowledge. Val is doch gewen, because he was the handwork of God. He was not only the most important person in the world, he was the only person in the world, him and his wife. Yetzir kapav shel Kodesh Baruch Hu. We'll call a gadol, anyone who's greater from his friend, his Yetzer Hora is greater from him. And especially the commandment is not to eat from the tree was very, very, very important. We see what the outcome is. As soon as he ate from the tree, he brought death into the world. Right? Death is not a normal thing. Death is not normal. Right? You say, a good friend of mine just passed away the other day. Right? Saying, but death is, they were saying, death, everybody dies is a normal thing. I said, my friends, you got the whole thing wrong. Life is what's normal. Life is normal. People are supposed to live. The raising of the dead is not so big of an aberration of reality as death is. People weren't supposed to die. You have a human being here, and he's got personality. Is that God took all this effort, if you want to call it, to make a human being so complicated, and all of a sudden one day, that's it, he becomes like a rock. That is against nature. A human being with all of his talents, his qualities, and this, all of a sudden, he's nothing. You throw him in the ground. Right? Take a living person, put him in the ground, they'll put you in jail. And here you go, as soon as you get, they buy a plot, let's bury him as fast as possible. A plot costs about $50,000. Who knows how much it costs? Why? Because Adam ate from the tree. That's how important it was for him not to eat from the tree. Because V Mized, like we can see from the tremendous fall that happened because of this until the end of all generations, came from exactly that sin of Adam eating from the tree, using your free will improperly. But here we're not talking about he was just sitting there and just, he was bored a little bit. So his Yetzer Hora really worked on him. Therefore, the Yetzer Hora worked on him very, very strong. In order to be good, you have to fight. You have to defy. You can't just take it easy. Man was created in order to fight, to make a battle. There has to always be constantly this battle between what is and what's supposed to be. We're here to do a job. And the Yetzer Hora wants us not to do the job. True, in the case of Adam, he had to sit there and do nothing. True. It's true. But still, he was supposed to be working on the ground. It says La'avda L'Shamra. And the snake and his wife, they somehow or other diverted his attention from what God wants to what he wants. A person should not fall into this trap of listening to the nachash, to the snake, to the serpent. I took a bunch of classes in the 12-step program. It's for addicts. You know what it is. 12-step program. So addiction is a very terrible thing. It's not just a person who can say, oh, wow, I'm drinking too much, I'm going to stop. It's a thing that a person can't stop. It's impossible for him. He has to take a whole course and have friends. Not everybody is given to addiction, but those people that are. So it says one of the tricks that they use, that anytime a person has an urge, and let's take our case, to drink or to gamble or whatever, that he has to understand this urge is not you. This urge is the serpent. This urgent is the nachash. Don't listen to him. To try to separate yourself, your soul, from your bad urges. That's what we have to do. Sich verlegen auf dem Adam by the dazika chet. Mit alle kochos, you have to defy with all of your powers the Yetzer Hora and opgeresen and tear yourself away from eating from the tree of knowledge. That's why God gave the Torah. That's why God gave the Torah. And it says, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow, we can finish this. And especially power was given to the women, that the women have the power, just like Chava made her husband sin, can convince her husband to sin. So women were given the power to convince their husbands to learn the Torah and to do what is good. Women, and we'll talk about this, the importance of the women and the importance of the Torah, we'll talk about tomorrow, because you can't do it on your own. Okay, story.